Randy Osborne for Government Watch, and you are?
Russell Rasco.
And you are out here today, ban assault weapons, and I just want to kind of get your idea of what that's going to do. I know that there was just a recent shooting in
Yes.
South Florida, and just want to kind of get your input on exactly what your efforts are.
Well, I think banning assault rifles is a small thing in comparison to all the things that need to be done. But we could at least do a few things like this. I cannot imagine why somebody needs to be walking around with an assault weapon. I cannot imagine that we want that to be happening in our community. We have kids that we love and people that we love, and we just need to have more control of our guns, and we need to talk to the legislators that supposedly care about the people. We have a lot of concern. We have a concern with the NRA. The NRA is funding the campaigns of some of these legislators. It's hard for them to be objective with their decisions about guns.
What is your definition of an assault weapon?
An AR-15, the one that was used in the recent shooting that happened in South Florida.
Okay.
And it's been used in several of other of the shootings as well.
How would you define that, though, from a more of a broad sense of what is an assault weapon? Because an AR-15 is actually a name of a particular, legally it's a sporting rifle here in the U.S. But how would you define it broader than that? Because if you ban, quote, an AR-15. The definition of that is going to be very complicated. So how would you look at that?
One of the things of the AR-15 is they're semi-automatic, and it's easy to make them automatic. And it's pretty hard to stop somebody that are involved in a shooting when they can get so many rounds off in such a short period of time. Actually, I don't really think that hunters need them. That's another thing. You know, sometimes I think this is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but what if the animals could shoot back?
Last question. What is your definition of the Second Amendment? Because obviously this whole debate is based on the Second Amendment.
The Second Amendment allows us to bear arms, is what it says. But you know what? Back in the time when the Second Amendment was put in place, they had muskets. They shot one shot at a time, and they had to reload. To take the idea of being able to bear arms from the Second Amendment and translating it into a semi-automatic or automatic weapon seems to me to be a very big step. So I'm not fighting the Second Amendment per se, but I think it's being misused.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're
Appreciate it. And you are from?
Right?
Where are you from?
I'm from Ocala, right here.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have a young lady that's protesting, well, let me rephrase that. So students are lucky enough to go to school. They should not feel lucky enough. They should not feel lucky enough to come home. Never again in gun violence.
And the other side.
I'm not going to read all that, but that died in South Florida. Is that correct? Okay, tell me what you're out here in gun violence. Tell me what is your take on it? What should we do? We have a Constitution. It's called the Second Amendment. What do we do with that? How do we handle this mess?
I think that when the Constitution was first written, it took 2 minutes to load a gun to fire one bullet. But now we have these semi-automatic rifles that can kill children and tons of people. This is a military-grade weapon that people are using in schools, and I'm just shocked that a lot of people don't see what's wrong with that. They think, well, you know, they're old enough to buy it, they should be able to buy it, but that's not fair to the students that died. How's that fair to their families? How's it fair to people in this country? We're the only country in the world that this happens to. Maybe once or twice in other countries, but this has happened over 300 times, and it needs to stop.
Do you think that the weapon is the problem, or do you think it's the people involved in the killings? I mean, I'll give you an example. New York City, there's just a terrorist attack. In fact, I had a daughter there.
Oh, wow.
And some crazed guy took a vehicle and started running people down with it. Do you think that it is a weapon, a tool, or do you think it's something, if it goes deeper than that?
Well, I think a little bit of both, because when you're take a car and you're running it into people, it's a bit different from, like, that's also malicious, but also maliciously taking a weapon that is notoriously known for killing people. Like, when you're driving your car out on the street, nobody just thinks, oh my God, he could hit all these people on the side of the street. That's not the first thing that comes to mind. When you see a big AR-15 or any, like an AK-47, I'm sorry, AK-15, you don't think that, you know that that's what they have malicious intentions. They don't think, oh, that's just a guy on the side of the street with an enormous automatic rifle. You know what I mean?
Okay. Another question is, you mentioned about when the Constitution was written. What is your thoughts about what was it written for? What was the intent of that document?
Well, fortunately and unfortunately, we live in a country that's filled with freedoms. So us protesting is just, us protesting. So we're just hoping that people will actually see that the change is here. We need to make a change. So when this was written, I think that they wrote it in terms of protection and your freedoms. So
protection and freedoms. Okay.
But now here we are, like 300 years later, and we're in an age where these weapons are so easy to come by, whereas they were not as easy to come by in the 1700s.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. And you're from?
I live here in Ocala, but I'm actually from Broward County. I went to Western High School in Davie, Florida, and I knew a couple of the victims and a lot of people that are in the hospital.
Okay. There has been one terrorist attack after another in New York City. Now, none of them were guns. One of them was with some guy on a subway tried to set off an explosive,
Right.
and they ran him down, and a couple people were hurt, but the device didn't go off. Another case, and she had friends that were in the area, none of them were hurt,
Right.
but another one had a very large truck, and he took off down a very, very common area of a lot of people walking, and quite a few people were killed there.
I can just
Again,
imagine.
it's a terrorist attack.
I'm very familiar with that. I've been here since '78, but I was born in Newark. Just outside
Okay,
of
well,
Newark.
yeah, you know that
So
you
I
know
lived
that
here
area.
until I was through high school.
One of the things that I'm trying to understand, just in talking to people about this issue, is I'm trying to understand, first of all, where the Constitution, why did the Founding Fathers actually write that document? I've just hit a couple interviews, and a lot of people are saying the same thing. You were one of them, that when the document was written, they had no idea that, high capacity weapons were going to be
No.
available to the public.
They didn't. And the Constitution is a living document. That's what they talk about it as that.
Okay, why is it a living
probably
document?
needs to be fixed in some areas.
Why do you think it's a living document? You think it's not relevant for today?
No, not that, because the ability to have amendments. Look at how many amendments came to the Constitution after it was written. And what about the Bill of Rights that wasn't even there at the very beginning? So it's a living document, and we have the ability to make those changes. And there are some areas that we have not caught up to the time. We need to think about making some changes. Now, it's pretty hard to make changes in the Constitution, and it's pretty tough to get people to even think about that, because the Constitution's like the Bible, that nobody wants to change it. But we have to keep in mind there were a lot of things. First of all, when the Founding Fathers, who were great individual people, I think, and together they were wonderful. They put together this wonderful democracy, which I love. But you know what? In order to have a country back at that time, they compromised with the issue of slavery. And when we became a country, we were a slave-owning country. Now, fortunately, we found our way out of that, and some changes in the Constitution.
It's actually wasn't changes the Constitution. It was actually the Constitution that created that change.
Okay, you can say it either way.
I give you an
That's exactly
example. A lot of the Founding Fathers had great issue with it, but they knew that if they could get that document in place, that at a later time, because it had freedoms of all people, that they could actually address that. So,
Well, they had to make a lot of changes. For example, when they said all men are created free and equal, they didn't say all people. And it took until the turn of the century before women could even vote. So they had to straighten out that. This is an issue that needs to be straightened out. But even if the Constitution doesn't straighten out the Second Amendment, we cannot use the Second Amendment to justify everybody carrying weapons. I was thinking the other day, some of the people were suggesting maybe teachers ought to have guns and concealed weapons.
That's a bill right now, by the way, in Tallahassee.
So now you want to say, if I want to become a teacher and educate children, I got to be able to carry a concealed weapon possibly so I can defend against enemies coming in and trying to hurt the kids. Well, what if I decide to be one of the people to do that, and I take out my concealed weapon and I attempt to defend against this shooter, and I shoot one of the children by mistake? I miss the shooter and shoot a kid. Am I then a murderer or a hero? Because I jumped out there with my gun to defend the kids, but I ended up killing a kid.
Let me ask you a question. What do you think, when they wrote that's the Second Amendment, when they put that in there,
Yeah.
what do you think their intent was? What do you think they did it for?
I feel like I know what their intent was. They had a situation there where they were under the thumb of a government that they felt was unjust. And that government was armed, and they were not. And they felt like they needed to make sure that the government does not step in and take over the people, so they wanted to allow the people to defend themselves. That's an interesting concept. Does that mean we're armed against Washington? We don't want Washington to try to come in and take over the country, and so that's why we have arms? Well, we don't say that anymore. We talk about people hurting people, somebody breaking into your house, trying to rape your wife or something like that. We don't talk about the government coming in and trying to take over. Although we do have some white supremacists that think that. So, I think that's why we had the Second Amendment in there to begin with, so that people could defend themselves against the evils of a powerful government. But I don't think that's why it's there now.
You think it is a living document, so you think it has to be relevant for today, and because of that you think that it needs to be changed? Or
I don't consider myself wise enough to know exactly how to go about making changes. But I do think the Constitution is a living document, and I think it needs to be addressed because it's being abused.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you so much. Let's see what else we got here. Anybody want to talk? Anybody want to talk to me? Nobody? Oh, come on.
I should. I'm a mother.
What? Hey, I would like to talk. I haven't talked to a mother.
What is it for?
I'm just doing interviews. This is the organization called Florida Government Watch. It's a YouTube channel, but we also do a little bit of broadcasting on other areas. But we're just asking questions. I'm going to go on and walk over here, and I'm going to come back this way, okay?
Have you been to Brooklyn Street yet?
Not yet. I'm on my way
You
there.
should. There's a lot of good people out there.
All right. Thank you all. Anybody want to talk to me before you go to Harry's?
You probably want to talk to us after.
Well, yeah, really. No. No, I like Harry's. So. This is Randy Osborne, Florida Government Watch, and I'm talking to
Sandra Cooper.
and
Wendy Adams.
y'all are out here. I noticed probably in an effort with the school shooting that just happened in South Florida.
In support of parking students.
Okay, and tell me, what is your recipe to stop violence in classrooms?
Well, first of all, I think we need to do something about the AR-15. AR-15s, there's no reason for anyone to have an AR-15. And it's just so sad because we could not even, after the Vegas shooting, our legislators would not do anything about bump stocks. And the answer is not to arm teachers. I'm not going to carry a gun. We both teach. I'm not going to carry a gun with my students. That's not my job. Is not to kill people. My job is to teach students. And because I'm an English teacher, one of my jobs is to teach them empathy and understanding, and the notion how does it feel to be in another person's skin. And so I'm certainly not interested in carrying a gun to kill anyone who comes in.
Okay, there's a lot of there's been a lot of violence. I'll give you an example. This is just a personal one. My daughter goes to school in New York City, and there has been numerous attempted and terrorist attacks in New York City the past year. None of them were gun related. One of them was an explosive vest that was made out of household products. The other one was a really big truck.
Was that the subway?
Yeah.
the subway.
One of them was a really big truck that ran over
That was a park.
a good number of people, and he pulled out of.
That was a park.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, how is that? Do you think guns are the root of the
I was
problem,
going
or
to say
you?
you just changed the conversation.
Yeah, that's
When you start
right.
talking-
They're not
You just
related.
changed the conversation. They're not related. What we're talking about, and we're also talking about white Christian terrorists. Those are the ones who have the guns and who are
Say
killing
that again.
people. White Christian terrorists, the AR-15s. We want to talk about. We always try to change the conversation, and we try to talk about terrorism. What we need to do is talk about gun control, and we need to talk about our problem with guns in this country.
So it's the
You
guns,
only
not
want
the
the
people.
wealthy, you only want the wealthy and powerful to have guns who in history
I'm not saying
committed
that at all.
atrocities. Well, that's what it's coming to. If
I'm
you
not
take
saying
away
that at
from
all,
the
and you're changing the
citizen,
conversation again.
if you take away from the
You're changing the
citizen,
conversation.
well then what is going to
What
prevent?
does banning an AR-15 have anything to do with what you just
Well,
said?
why don't you protest the high and mighty that have the
I got another
weapons of
question for you.
atrocity that have
An
committed
AR-15
atrocities in history. Why aren't you protesting that?
I have as well.
An AR-15. Let me ask you this: an AR-15. I'm not trying to change the subject. I'm just.
Conversations
I
about
want to get
this,
to the
it's
root
not
of the
about
problem.
average.
It's what I want to understand. An AR-15 is
A semi-automatic.
what is it?
Well, it's a semi-automatic, and I know it's not a military weapon. I know it's a weapon that civilians have. And my husband was a member of the NRA, by the way. And I actually went through the paperwork for a concealed carry permit. It's not that people. My husband has a tag on his car, bumper sticker on his car that says "gun-toting liberal." Okay, because it's not that I think people should do away with all their guns. It's that there are some guns are too dangerous and too easy to get.
Okay, you've identified an AR-15. How are you going to? I mean, there's other weapons out there that.
Absolutely, but we're talking about the number of people who can be killed. Because, okay, I've heard the argument, well, you can be killed with a knife, yeah, but you can't kill as many people. When the AR-15 in Vegas, when that had a bump stock on it, he was able to injure, over 500 people. He killed almost 60 people. You can't do that with a knife. And also, we're talking about something that's so easy to get. I believe Cruz, the Parkland shooter, I believe he was able to legally obtain that gun, even though he had mental issues. Even though he had noted mental issues, he was able to legally obtain an AR-15. That is something that we can do. We can stop that. And again, I'm not saying we disarm everyone. I believe in the Constitution.
Okay. That's my next question. That's my
I
next
believe in
question.
First Amendment rights and Second Amendment rights.
Let me ask you this then:
Okay.
what do you think our founding fathers? What was the
Founding fathers
intent?
didn't have AR-15s.
What was the
No
intent
part-
then?
no-
Not what they had. What was their intent?
The intent was a well-regulated militia, and that's not what we see. Because we forget about the second part of the Second Amendment. It's that we have not just that we allow carry, but within a well-regulated militia.
So you're talking about the only purpose of the Second Amendment is for the military?
No, you're putting words in my mouth.
No, I
I
understand.
heard you do
I
it.
didn't say, yeah.
No, I want to
That's
understand
the
it. That's the
only-
reason I asked the question.
Yeah, I didn't say that's the only reason, because there are certain reasons to have, I believe that if someone comes into your house, you can, in fact, you should be able to protect yourself. You protect yourself and your property. I don't believe in Baxley stand your ground laws, because I don't believe that that the same thing that happened with George Zimmerman and Martin, that this kid was, he was going into a Quick Mart and he was killed. And so we have to do something about that, though I understand that's different than what we're talking about with AR-15s. This is something that we could do immediately. We could do something immediately about this issue.
Do you think that our founding fathers had any, because the other side, your other side, I'm going to tell you what they're saying. Your other side is saying that the purpose of the Second Amendment was for the people to be able to protect themselves against a tyrannical government. Do you think that was their intent, or do you think that's kind of like that is that's not
If
relevant
we're
today.
talking about our founding fathers, because they went through a revolution. So our founding fathers, in fact, did go through a revolution, and they used that well-regulated militia. Now, are you talking about, you think that there's actually, because what those are called are militias, and a lot of the extremist organizations will say that that's why they want their guns. But what we're really talking about at this point, they are terrorist organizations, because they're talking about now arming themselves against our government, and we are now in a democracy. And so what you're telling me, if you say, I want to, we're looking at both sides in this odd way, because we say, oh, I want to be able to arm myself against my own government. Well, wait a minute, you're talking then about the United States of America.
They were creating a government that had
Yeah,
no military.
the founding fathers
Right.
were creating a
We
government.
needed
Now
a
you're talking
military
about-
which
yeah.
didn't exist.
So you're saying part of the, again, I'm asking the question, okay?
Yeah.
And I want to understand it.
Yeah. Now I'm happy when you ask the questions. Yeah, I just want to make sure
Right.
we have.
Right, I'm not trying to put something in your word. I'm trying to ask a question,
Yeah.
but I'm phrasing it so that I personally can understand it, to be
Okay.
really honest about it.
Okay.
What you're saying is the Second Amendment is for personal protection. I think I heard you say that kind
Well,
of.
no, actually, I didn't say the Second Amendment. I said I believe
Okay.
that and when we talk about guns, I mean, I do think we have a real gun problem. And when we talk about guns, it's that, yeah, we do use them for protection. I didn't say the Second Amendment says whatever, but I'm saying my personal feeling, yeah, we do use them for protection. We use them to protect ourselves and our property. Okay. So what was the other part?
Yeah. And then the second part is it's for a well-rounded militia, meaning specifically.
But if you use that now, what you're saying is you're ready to take up arms against our government.
Okay, so it's not relevant, is what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying no.
No, I interpret the militia as being the national.
I'm not debating it. I'm asking questions. So I want to understand it.
As a student of law, I have researched this issue. In fact, I'd written a bomber in 2013, and I look at the Second Amendment as in the spirit of its writing at the time. At the time, the intent was because there was no real army. We didn't have, the United States did not have the type of government that we have today. Therefore, they had to arm the people. And they're giving them the right to bear arms to protect themselves from invaders and to protect themselves from invading armies. Okay, that's the end of it. You have to look at the spirit of the law when it was written at the time. Therefore, the only weapons were allowed were whatever they had, which were Gatling guns, flintlock guns, sidearms. That was it. They could not foresee the future as to atomic weapons, missile-guided weapons, automatic weapons of all sorts, a killing machine. That's what we have now, a killing machine. Back then, what would a flintlock rifle do? From here to maybe that sign over there.
And not very accurate.
Okay, let me ask you this, and again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you're saying that really the Second Amendment, because of what you just described, is probably really not relevant
Not at all
today.
Not at all today. We have to grandfather. You see, in all of the constitutions in the free world allows you to grandfather. That grandfather clause allows you to go back and revisit that particular document, like you go back to the Magna Carta and you revisit it and you dissect it for the time now. And you'll find that the Second Amendment was written for a specific time, no other time. I'm not saying that we don't have the right to bear arms, but you're limited to the flintlock guns, you're limited to Gatling gun, and you're limited to the long rifle. End of story.
Now you said are you a professor or?
No, I've researched lots
Okay.
called redemption in law, and I've been at this now for about over 25, 30 years. And I've gone back to Magna Carta, I've gone back to not just for guns, but for other things as well. Our rights are being violated. People are being killed on the street for no reason at all. Okay, all because our governments will not go back and take a look at some of these problems at the root. That's the problem.
Thank you very much. You want to add
I'll
on?
say one more thing. If our revered founding fathers were to reappear, they would be the very first to demand change.
Oh yes,
The very first.
for sure, for sure.
And
They did not intend this.
Thank you all very much. Now, do y'all live here or
I'm from Canada.
Canada? Okay.
No, I live here.
Okay.
In Marion County.
Teacher?
Yeah, I'm a teacher, and
Awesome.
I don't want my students murdered.
I don't think anybody does. I have a daughter that I worry about every day.
We don't want anybody murdered. And we don't want the wealthy and powerful murdering people either.
right,
We don't
so-
want anyone.
So you're on the other side of this
I'm on the
debate.
side of a citizen
Thank you.
having a right, because what are you going to do? Just have the wealthy and powerful have the weapons? And you study your history and see the atrocities they've committed throughout history.
Right. Let me ask you a question. What do you think that the Second Amendment was written for? When our founding fathers wrote it, what was the value of that? What was the purpose of it?
That was so the militia would be armed. But, the average citizen should have as much rights as anyone else unless they violate those rights. If they don't violate those rights, they should be able to have the right to defend themselves like anyone else.
Do you think that the issues with school shootings, etc., everybody here once says it's the guns. Is it the guns or is it something different than that?
It's human nature. It's human nature. Okay, you're going to have to deal with it. Whoever's really doing it, and I wasn't there. I don't know all the facts. First thing, don't just believe whatever you hear, because things can be twisted.
If you were in this situation, how would you remedy or help control this problem?
Just got to keep a check on if someone violates the law, then punish that person, but don't punish everybody. Don't take away the rights of everybody. Just punish those that violate them, and whoever they might be. Find out who's really doing it. And just don't believe everything you hear on the news, because that can be twisted and distorted too. So unless you know all your facts, be careful where you put the blame. And then just try to find what the real evidence is and punish those that are really behind all this.
I got it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being the other side of this thing. Got some good interviews, I think. Good interviews. You go to school here in Ocala?
Yes, sir. I go to Florence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How'd y'all get together? I mean, it looks like a bunch of people got together. How'd y'all do it?
Well, I don't know if you know Maurice, but he kind of organized it, but I know he spread the word out even more. So he texted me actually, and he was like, "Hey, are you coming?" I was like, "Oh, I actually didn't know about it, but I'll come." So I came.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other people, most of the teenagers on this side, they're either friends with Maurice or they go to school with Maurice. So I'm assuming that's how they all knew about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
Okay.
I found out through him.
Got it. Okay. Did it take a lot of? I saw quite a few teachers here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're on the other side though.
Oh, okay.
So I just.
Yeah, actually, I saw my humanities professor over there, so.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw quite a few. In fact, I interviewed a few of them. So.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. You have a good day. Randy Osborne here with Florida Government Watch. Just went out and there was a protest against gun violence. What I noticed was a lot of teachers were there. I got actually some interviews from teachers. Didn't want to really give them my viewpoint. I was asking questions. They wanted to keep the questions very controlled. But what I've noticed is we're in trouble as a nation. People don't understand the Constitution. They don't understand. They think a lot of people believe it's a living document. It's not relevant for today. So this is Randy Osborne. Until next time.